you're going to start getting to know yourself by sitting with an image and admitting or claiming what you respond to. We go through this world and are bombarded by imagery and sound and experiences and opinions, and we often lose ourselves in it. So this is an excellent way to get to know yourself so that you can be true to yourself.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're continuing our conversation with Katherine Skaggs. She's a visionary artist, intuitive, author, teacher, spiritual counselor, shamanic practitioner, and a painter of souls. If you listened to Tuesday's episode, you know that we're deep diving into tarot and oracle cards. How can these enhance your spiritual practice? Why might you want to work with them? So today, we're really diving into the basics of how you can start reading tarot or oracle cards at home. We're going to cover how to pick your first deck and cleanse its energy, how you can work with one card a day to get in touch with your spirit guides and helpers. Katherine's going to explain a ritual for us that we can use to incorporate readings into our yoga and meditation practice, which is something I've always been really curious about. She's going to explain the different spreads in card reading, what they are, how they work, and which basic ones we can start with. And we end by talking about journaling, one of my favorite topics in terms of how journaling connects with oracle cards, and about how you can sharpen your intuition. And these cards can really be a tool to get to know yourself at a deeper level, which is something I never really fully understood until this episode with Katherine. She ends by also speaking to us about the role of the divine feminine in our society and her personal work as an artist. You definitely want to stay tuned and listen to learn more. Before we dive into the episode, I'd like to remind you to support the show, to keep episodes and information like this coming to you. The best way to do that is to make a purchase on SavannahSpirit.com. And that code, podcast30, will get you 30% off anything your heart desires. The second way is to just leave a review here on iTunes. It's simple, but it really makes a big difference. So if you haven't yet left a rating or review, just take a moment to do that today. Give back, and really, it means the world to me, and it helps the show get in front of more people who are looking for information like this and maybe don't have access to it right now. All right, now let's dive back into our conversation with Katherine. So we're back with Katherine, and on Tuesday, she was telling me how we can get in touch with our spirit guides or our angels, and that it's not as simple, Katherine, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not as simple as like, if you pick a card one day, that means that that person's your official spirit guide. It's like we can call on the energy of all of these beings, but likely we should be open and curious, coming back to that keyword from Tuesday's episode, curious about what symbols and energies we feel like that we see over and over again to help us kind of figure out who we resonate with in the spectrum of spirit guides that are available to us.
You know, and they'll reveal, the more curious you are, the more they will do their best to get your attention. I remember when I started doing shamanic work 11 years ago, I had studied metaphysics and deep into that world, but I had some teachers in shamanism come into my life at just the right time. And as I did, I had a very interesting experience because Isis started to make herself known to me. And I had had some mystical experiences already connecting me to Egypt. Well, it was when I began the shamanic work that she came full forward. I'd painted her already for the tarot deck here, but she let herself be known to me that she was my divine mama and had been with me since forever, I think. And it put a lot of pieces together. So there's a timing thing that as we get curious and we move through different cycles in our lives, that certain guides will absolutely make themselves known and be there for us.
And so you just mentioned Isis, and you mentioned on Tuesday the totem animals. And I think this is another place where people get intimidated or confused or not sure how to start, because these decks seem to be about different lineages a little bit in a way, or different families or different themes. So how does one know where to start? Like what deck to pick as their first one?
So I'm going to be the first person to tell everyone to do their best to get out of their head and to move into their heart and their sense of what brings them joy. So when you look at there's so many out there today. When you just take a survey of, say, go to your metaphysical store and stand in front of all the decks, notice which ones you're immediately drawn to. Just by the look, by the feeling, by the packaging. Because every which way your body and your energy wants to respond is going to go toward the deck, not because your head thinks it, but because you're energetically connecting to it. And so that, again, is a clue that that deck has something for you that it wants to tell you. I would set up a intention and a rule, a spiritual rule, that when you go to look online or to go look at a store, that deck just glows. Whatever deck you need, that it immediately calls to you and attracts you. And that one of your 5 senses, or your 6th sense, which is made up of all the 5 senses working together, is going to immediately give you a clue. And if you walk in to a store and say nothing attracts you, then be patient. Don't force it. Play with some cards that they have that are samples. Feel them in your hands. Walk away when it doesn't feel right. That's a big piece of trust right there, because I've noticed everything in my life tells me that everything shows up at the right time when you truly ask that it show up. So I'm going to tell you, follow your intuition. Now, if you're really interested in angels at this time, then go look at all the angel decks that are available. If you're more oriented towards shamanism and Native American type things, go see which ones, is there a category that draws you? And you might get there and see this one artist that's done a deck and you can't do anything but pick that deck up. Well, that is all the breadcrumbs calling you, and your guides and your helpers calling you to say, start here.
I love it. That's really helpful. My next question, and this might be such a beginner, silly question, but once we have a deck and once it's ours, because I get asked this all the time in social media, how do you sort of claim the deck as your own, cleanse the energy of the deck and get it connected to you? Because something that's so interesting that you shared with me was that these decks are really connected to our subconscious. So I'm wondering if you can say more about that, in the sense, like, if I used your deck, right, would that be a different reading than if I use that same deck that was my own deck that I own, that's been living in my home? I don't know if that makes sense, but
yes, absolutely. And I may give a different answer than a lot of people out there. Some people think that, oh my God, nobody can touch my deck. And I can appreciate that, because I have shamanic tools I do healing work with. And I usually tell people, don't touch my stuff unless I give you permission. And that's where it starts, is it's a permission thing. It's an energetic thing too. So I kind of have a rule around all my stuff, that even if somebody unconsciously picks it up, nothing gets slimed. Everything is love. So that's my rule. And with what you said, to connect to your deck, if you smudge or use particular incense or sage, I would take your deck home. I would smoke it just as part of a ritual to bless it and say hello. Just like any and all allies, whether it be spirit guides or totem animals or any part of the invisible realm that you're asking to be a helper and an ally, say hello to the spirit of your deck. Say hello to whomever you have called in and picked up and purchased. Immediately say hello and thank it for coming to you, and thank it for being a wonderful divination tool, and thank it for all the blessings and power that it's bringing to you. Again, connect your heart to it. I always find the best path personally that I want to experience, and what I teach others, is to choose to see it filled with love and call forth all its powers that are born of love. And know that when you smudge it, that you're just bringing it right up into your vibration so you can connect with it, instead of thinking, oh my God, somebody slimed it because they touched it. That's just, again, which side of the coin are you coming from? So that's usually what I do. And I bless it, and I bless it over and over. And if I have an altar, I leave it on my altar to gather energy when I do prayers or meditations. And I often will have a bag or a box that's specific to that deck, and it stays in a particular place, usually either in a drawer or on an altar where it's specifically being cared for. We all can develop more ability to care for what we have. And so this is like connecting to all these spiritual energies that are there to help you.
I love it. I personally, with my, well, I have a couple decks, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because when you talk about the deck being a map of our subconscious, it's almost like, the more bonded we are with our deck, the better, right? Because we're going to get better breadcrumb clues, as you were saying, to sort of what we need to do. So a lot of listeners probably have a yoga practice, have a meditation practice who are listening to this. So I'm curious what you think, or what your advice would be of the best moment to maybe pick a card. Like if you're sitting to meditate or sitting to do a yoga practice, is that something you maybe want to do at the beginning or the end? For example, something I often do is I have the deck right next to my mat when I do my physical asana practice. I move my mat all around my house, so I don't have one static altar, so I just keep the deck very, very close. And then I like to meditate, and I pick the card at the very end. So I like to think of sort of my asana practice and then the meditation, the energy of the meditation sort of soaking into the deck, and then I pick a card last. But I realize someone might also pick a card first and maybe sort of like reflect on that as part of the meditation. I'm curious if you have any just advice or insights about how one might incorporate the decks into a yoga and meditation context.
That's an excellent question. I think of cycles and I think of beginnings and endings, and that everything is in a circle like a medicine wheel. So when someone sits to begin a practice of meditation or yoga, if they want to focus their intention, they may hold the deck to their hearts as they're sitting and making themselves still and prepared, and ask if there's anything they need to know as they go into this that would be beneficial. And they can pull one card or three cards and not do necessarily a big spread. It could be an inspirational card, and it could be a beginning, a starting point. And that to me would be something I might do as I begin something is just like, who wants to show up to support me? Who wants to show up and bring me love? Is there anything that wants to show up? So that is a possibility. And then at the end, I love what you do, to have your deck soaking up everything about your practice, and then to finish with a reading or with several cards and say, now what? What have we shifted and what do we need to know now? Or what would you like to show us as we complete this? So in the beginning or end or both, whatever someone is guided to. Again, I'm such a flexible little Pisces Cancer girl. I always lean toward intuition as the guide, and developing practices and disciplines is wonderful. And I like to make sure that they're coupled with some flexibility and fluid stability of the intuitive self to know that, oh, today I need a card or today I don't. So that's my answer.
Oh, that's helpful. I like what you're saying is how we can think about the pulling of a card, even just as an opening and closing sort of bookend, right? Whether it's part of your personal practice or just to kind of create that sacred space. You've used a word now that I think is just like this charged word that people get really intimidated by, or I know I do, which is spreads, right? So we haven't even talked about that yet. Now, can you describe for the listeners what a spread is and how it relates to what we're talking about, just so they have it in their mind's eye?
So oftentimes, like in the beginning, I'd pull one or three cards. You often see that in oracle decks and even in tarot decks, just how to get in information with these very small amounts. So you're not intimidated. I never did spreads until I worked with Sage, because she gave me the confidence of getting to know what I was looking at, what I was experiencing. And a spread could be anywhere from 5 to 15 cards where they're laid out in a pattern, and each section has a purpose or information. So I do a 5 or 15 card spread. It's very specific. I learned it from my friend Sage, and it's my go-to. And there's many different spreads, but the cool thing about the 5 or 15 is they're based on the same pattern. And there's a spread of 1 to 3 in the very center. And then you've got an upper right-hand wing. I'm going to call it a wing. An upper left-hand wing, a lower left-hand wing, and a lower right-hand wing. I hope you all can visualize that. And in the middle, it has a specific purpose. So when you ask a question for this overview of this question, the very center has to do with, in tarot terms, the querent. And I used to think, what the heck does that mean? And it means this is who you are in relationship to the question you're asking. So if I pulled 3 cards that had a a goddess in one of them, and I had a earth suit in another that was somewhat positive. And then I had a mental suit in the other one that was kind of negative. I'd think, oh, this is me and my attitude as I go into asking this question. So the goddess would be my divine, so let's say it's Lakshmi. So if I'm asking a question about my health, Lakshmi is sitting there saying, you're abundant in your health. You should be reflecting something about abundance, and what you ask for is given to you. And that would be there. And then the other earth card that I said would be kind of positive. That's telling me in the physical, I'm doing okay. Now, the mental suit, if that was a critical card, because the mental suit is often one that's filled with edgy stuff because it's our egos. We get in trouble with our beliefs and our thoughts. We often get afraid. So if I pulled criticism in there, that's one of those 3 cards about me asking about my health, that's telling me it's my mind that screws me over as I ask this question. That would give me one little shot right there out of the whole spread. But I'm not done. So I'm not done with those cards. I'd go up to the upper right-hand corner, and there's 3 more cards there. And it gives me, this particular section of all these 15 cards tells me what is the energy of the overview. Now, that's what we've deemed the meaning of those 3 cards. I could change that, but that's the way I understand this spread and remember it. Meaning, what's the big picture I need to know about my health? And it would give me 3 more cards that have specific energies that are giving me an overview of the situation. Now, when I go to the next 3 cards in the upper left-hand corner, that has to do where my lessons are or my challenges. So again, it's a section that to that question is giving me more refined information than me pulling 1 or 2 cards. It's saying, hey, your challenges have to do with, and then whatever 3 cards pulled, it's telling me I have lessons or I got an opportunity to learn something and change based on those 3 cards pulled. Then in the lower left-hand corner of this particular spread, that information about the question, how about my health, this is the action I need to take. So I'd have 3 more cards describing the energy and the specifics of what I need to do to have good health. And then the last 3 cards in the lower right-hand corner are outcome. So based on my question and all these other energies, if I follow suit with what's been given in this reading, I'm going to get a particular outcome. Now, if I had a negative card in the outcome, it's telling me that would be a particular energy that I need to be aware of. It's like a heads up. You don't want this to be in your outcome. So we're giving you a warning card here that says you need to pay attention and take care of yourself based on everything else given. Does that help?
That's super helpful. That's a great example. And I think if people are intimidated, like you said, they don't have to do these complex spreads right away, right? They can just pull 1 card a day, or they could do, I know I often do the 3 card past, present, future spread, which is pretty simple. So if someone's just pulling 1 card a day, do you suggest that they ask a question, or maybe they're just asking for general guidance? Because I mean, I think a big insight or aha moment for me was when we talked about how the framing and the quality of your question is really the kickoff point for how, insightful and successful your whole reading's going to be. So
yes, I'd tell you what I would do. As I began, I would pull a card a day. And at the beginning of it, I would first of all sit myself down and get still. I find in our busy world, like, oh yeah, what do the cards want to tell me? And might haphazardly pull a card, which you'll get an answer. But what I find as I'm talking to you about this is that it's really important to just take a few minutes and get grounded, pull your deck to your heart and get centered in your heart and not your head. And then ask the question when you feel like you're still, so that you're coming from the most grounded, centered place you can to say, I really need to know about whatever this situation. What can you give me feedback? Or, if someone has something pressing in their lives, like they're getting a new job, what do I need to know about going into this interview? What good information to prep or to be prepared for the outcome do I need to have? How do I put my best foot forward? Or if there's nothing really big deal going on, you can get up and pull a card at the beginning of the day and say, gosh, how good can my day get? What do I need to know to help set the energy for a wonderful day? And show me.
Oh, that's really helpful. And I love it's like the positive spin on the question always is super important.
Yes, because with the mystical training I've had, with the mystical experiences I've had, and the shamanic training I've had, everything tells me that we are the creator of our reality. So if that is true, And you want to explore that as you being a powerful creator and designer of your life, the artist of your life. You've got to choose where your focus is. Metaphysically speaking, a universal law is wherever your attention goes, so does that energy. So if you're focused on negative, dark things, the universe is going to give it back to you. If you're focused on everything getting better, being filled with more light, it doesn't mean you're not going to be honest about things that are not fun. I mean, I have a cheerleader type personality I want to be, but I know that when I have to look at some challenging things, it's me oriented towards positivity and hope that's going to help me make the best decisions and create the best life and outcome. So the same is true about working with any divination system or tarot cards, is to focus it in the right direction. Even if you've got some negative things that show up, you're going to be more able to handle them and know it's okay. If I created all the good stuff and the bad stuff, well, I can change the bad stuff if I get aware of it.
This is really helpful. I think one thing I'd love you to touch on a little bit for us is coming back to this idea of intuition. And you were saying how we can read the cards through artwork or by, just resonating with the artwork instead of going straight to the book. And one of the reasons I've always been so interested in cards is because I feel like we have so few tools in modern day that are helping us sharpen the sword of our intuition, helping us practice. Because I like to tell my students, like, your intuitive capacity is just like any other muscle, right? If you wanted to bulk up your biceps, you'd know how to lift weights, free weights, or, weights at the gym in order to strengthen that body part. And it's the same with your intuition. You have to practice in order to, get more familiar with it and strengthen that capacity. And I've always felt like the cards are a really great way to do that, just intuitively. But I'm curious what you have to say about this, because you obviously know a lot more about all of this than I do. So do you agree with me that the cards are like a way, it's kind of like going to the gym for your intuition a little bit?
Yes, they're excellent. And to continue to work with the cards, if you get a deck, whatever deck you choose, sit and pull a card every day to learn the energy of the card, besides to ask a question. Go through the entire deck and get to know the deck, both how you feel about what you're seeing, fill yourself with your first response to it, write down notes, be in communication with yourself. Admit this scares me, or admit, I feel really yummy about that particular card. What is that? And then go and consult the book later, see what you've written down and see what that author has been telling you about the energies in the symbol system. Look at all the colors and symbols in the deck. If there's astrological symbols, if there's particular colors, if there's particular beings in the deck, get to know who they are. Fill your little brain with that info, but go back and forth between how does that feel to me? What's the first message I get? I don't know what a message is, so I need to break it down. What is the color that I like the most? What is the one I don't like the most? Everything is vibrational, and it's speaking to all your energies. So if you respond in a negative way toward a card, get to know that card with every part of it and see what it is you're reacting to. Because then you can diffuse the reaction, both through your feeling senses, through your intuitive self, and through getting some information in your brain so you can unwind whatever that shadow energy is. If you're absolutely yummy about a card, get to know that too. And you'll start recognizing certain colors may be a trigger towards positivity or something negative. There may be certain expressions that send you one way or another, but you're going to start getting to know yourself by sitting with an image and admitting or claiming what you respond to. We go through this world and are bombarded by imagery and sound and experiences and opinions, and we often lose ourselves in it. So this is an excellent way to get to know yourself so that you can be true to yourself.
I love it. I'm taking so many notes. I know you mentioned earlier a little bit about journaling, and you were saying, I think it's so great what you're saying, because I think a lot of people want to jump to this place of like, okay, what are my 5 to 7 personal spirit guides and how do I know exactly who they are? And it's like, no, it's this longer, slower process where you need to get familiar with the energy of all the cards in your deck, for example, right? And let that be revealed over time. What I'm hearing you say is we actually need to set aside a lot of time to reflect on what we're seeing and experiencing. And I know you mentioned earlier journaling, and you were mentioning journaling, I think, with Archangel Michael. Can you I'm a huge, passionate journaler. And I love doing journaling where I kind of Q&A journal. I ask a question and then I kind of just try to channel my higher self and write the answers. One of my favorite productivity and, just mental sanity hacks. I just love doing that. And it sounded like you were doing something similar, inviting in maybe some of these spirit guides. So I just wanted to ask you about that before we let you go.
Oh, that's a great thing to do to develop intuition and your connection to your spirit guides and your helpers. Since we all have helpers, I found through my own personal journey that I was usually asking for help when I was suffering. I didn't realize when I first began, that I could do it from not suffering because I just had some stuff to unwind in myself. So journaling is an excellent place to sit still, to be quiet, and to focus communication and to learn to become receptive and not just active. We live in a very male, active, principled world, reasoning model. I'm going to call it the patriarchy for no better reason than to call it that. Is that we've been led that way. And now we're learning, as we develop our spirituality and go deeper into knowing ourselves, is to be still, to do yoga, to journal, and to reflect. So that reflection time is a very good discipline to enter into our busy lives, because that's the only way you're going to get to know yourself and get to know what your spirit guides or the cards are telling you. Is you've got to stop. You've got to stop and reflect. So make your journaling process simple. Set a tone for your journaling. It could be just everyday journaling, or it could be very specific to get to know some of your guides. So sit down and say hello. I love the shamanic teaching of reciprocity as a foundation for everything. It's in the Karo language of the Andean Karo people. They're an indigenous people there. They have a teaching called Ayni, A-Y-N-I, and it basically means reciprocity. As you give, so do you receive. And so I find that to connect with spirit guides or helpers in the invisible world, or, the spirits on the land, the best way to do it is to show up and say hello. And do that through your journaling. I want to know who you are. I understand that you're here to help me and that you're really powerful. I want to feel you, sense you, know you. Give me a breadcrumb. Drop a penny or a quarter on the ground and know that I'll remember when I see it sitting there that you're trying to make contact or that you're making contact. Give some guidelines or suggestions that trigger your subconscious and your conscious mind to respond. Tell them, make it really blatant. I'm a slow learner some days, or help me not be a slow learner. What would that be like? And so you cultivate the conversation by honoring them, saying hello, honoring their power. If you have any idea, say it's Archangel Michael. I really want to get to know you, Michael. I'm attracted to you. Can I hear you? Can I see you and feel you? I want to know what that's like. What's your message to me now? And then pull some cards and journal with what you get. That will activate the field and they get very excited. I feel my energies around my guides and all the connections I have are like vibrating upwards as we're speaking of this.
So magical. I can't wait to try this. I think as a, kind of last question, and this will tie in really well to you telling us about your decks, which are so, so beautiful, is something you mentioned a few times now about, you said in our first episode together about how a big passion of yours was to restore the feminine. And then you were just talking now about, the patriarchy a little bit. So I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that, in the sense that, like, are these cards, or did these cards used to be, like, if we're restoring the feminine into the cards, or I know you with the Mythical Goddess Tarot, that's something that you've been doing. Were they absent? Tell us more what you mean by that. And I think it's a great segue into talking about your specific decks as well.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the mythology of the goddess and the divine feminine. About 8,000 years ago, from the stories I've heard, we pretty much went underground. This is about the time that in ancient Samaria, the patriarchy was making itself visible, meaning that all these sacred goddess temples aligned with Inanna and the Egyptian beings and just all around our world in different cultures. Once upon a time, we had matriarchal cultures that were non-warring. There was no conquering and dividing and overtaking a people. There were peaceful people in peaceful times. And it was based on a more divine feminine model, from what I understand. And as the Romans and particular peoples began to come in different areas and overtake, this more masculine, male-oriented reasoning model of conquering came in. And so the priestesses were killed, or they had to go into hiding. And some of them went into the churches and became nuns, and they put habits on and they cloaked themselves. And we were called whores if we were sacred sexuality priestesses. And we were called witches. And we were sent underground, or we were killed and murdered. And today we even have this coming out where there's a change taking place. We have the Me Too movement. We have spirituality that is a balance between honoring Mother Earth and honoring the feminine way in balance with a divine masculine model instead of a conquering, overtaking model. And so that's what I mean when we're ushering in an age where we are calling home the feminine and the goddess, so that we're not whores and we're not people who need to cover their bodies for fear that we'll be raped. That this is a time of coming back to the heart and intuition and love. And those principles live in both male and female bodies. It's not just a male or a female being in power. It is about the empowerment of the heart and empowerment of the spiritual self, and not just this outer linear earthbound model that's devoid of spirit. This is honoring the spirit in all beings in all life and learning to walk in balance together. That's my take on it. This is a place where we heal our relationship to the earth. We quit polluting it. We learn to live in balance, that she gives us everything, and that we're protected by the masculine energy instead of overpowered by it. So we're at a time of reckoning where the Mayans would tell you, according to my teachers, that we've ended a 26,000 year cycle and we're in these smaller baktuns or smaller cycles. And the cycle we're in now is moving toward a golden age. And I'm not sure linear time, if it's really the next 40 or 60 years. I would love that. But they say in the next 20 to 40 years, we're in the revolution. And it looks like it. We are in a revolution. We are facing the darkest of the dark times that would be called the Kali Yuga in the Hindu times. And that could be way longer than 40, 60 years. But the return of the feminine is the return of the heart. And it's the return of nurturing and this powerful energy that brings equality, that brings a care for everybody and not just a select few. I could go on and on, but that's my answer.
Oh, I love it. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this with us and for coming on the show. How can listeners find and connect with you? Find and connect with your work, find and connect with your decks? Talk them through that.
Couple of websites. And let me tell everyone, I do have the Mythical Goddess Tarot, which is authored by Sage Holloway, and I'm the artist and the publisher. And that's available at my website, KatherineSkaggs.com, as well as Amazon, as well as Star Chalice Sisters Publishing. You put it on there and you're going to find it. I've also got a deck that's the Master's Light Wisdom Oracle that I'm in the process of creating. I hope to have out by the end of 2018 or the beginning of 2019. And I've got some smaller oracle decks that are pocket blessing cards and pocket full of goddesses. All of those are available at KatherineSkaggs.com, as well as if you want to get to know your spirit guides, I do spirit guide paintings as well as channeled sessions for soul portrait sessions. So that's pretty much how you can roll with me if you'd like to get in touch.
Perfect. Well, I'll put that link to your website below. And once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Savannah listeners, let me know, did you enjoy this week's exploration into cards and oracle decks? This is something I was really passionate about learning more about, and I'd love to get feedback from you. You can go to savannahspirit.com/group to join our private Facebook group. Let me know what you thought of this week's episode and ideas for future guests or speakers that you'd like to have on the show. Remember, your ratings and reviews here on iTunes mean the world to me, and they really help support the podcast. So take a moment to leave a rating or review if you haven't done that yet. I hope you connect with your intuition today. I hope you do yoga. I hope you meditate, but maybe you start integrating some of the work Katherine and I talked about, whether it's just through pulling a card or sitting quietly and asking to connect with your spirit guides. I'm so sending you love. I can't wait to connect with you next week, and from my heart to yours, namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.